the river is rising again. The same river, the same valley, the same communities that spent the last 12 months burying their dead, installing new warning sirens, and trying to convince themselves it couldn't happen again. It is happening again. The Guadalupe River in the Texas Hill Country is flooding right now, today, as this video is being made. A flash flood emergency, the highest level of alert the National Weather Service can issue, has been declared for Kerr and Kendall counties. The city of Kerrville has declared a disaster. The governor of Texas has confirmed at least 2 deaths. More than 80 people have already been pulled from submerged cars, flooded homes, and rising water by helicopter, boat, and on foot. And the river is still rising. A year ago, just 12 months ago, this same stretch of the Guadalupe River killed more than 130 people in a single night. 27 of them were children at a summer camp called Camp Mystic, sleeping in cabins along the riverbank, who never made it out. It was the deadliest flash flood in Texas history in decades. The state spent the months that followed installing new sirens, updating warning systems, raising money, making promises. Those sirens activated in the early hours of this morning for the first time. Some of them worked. The flooding that is unfolding right now is not identical to what happened a year ago. The epicenter is different. The water levels in some gauges are tracking below last year's catastrophic peak, and the warning systems gave more people more time to act. But the rain totals are, in some locations, higher than what fell a year ago. Between 7 and 20 inches of rain have fallen across parts of the region in the past 48 hours. One gauge near Comfort, on the Guadalupe River, recorded a crest of 37 feet, 1.5 feet higher than last year's record at the same location. The river at some points rose 32 feet in 4 hours overnight. That is not a flood. That is a wall. When a river rises that fast, the warning time between the water is rising and the water is inside your house is measured in minutes, not hours. In the pre-dawn darkness of this morning, across Kerr County and into Uvalde County, families who thought they had time to wait discovered they didn't. Emergency crews spent the night and into the morning pulling people off rooftops, out of cars, and away from bridges that were threatening to wash out entirely. A large structure swept down the Guadalupe struck a bridge in Kerrville. Propane tanks were pushed onto roadways by the current. A barge came loose and jammed itself beneath the Sidney Baker Bridge. 20 inches of rain fell on Uvalde in 48 hours, an amount that approaches the city's entire annual rainfall average. To understand why this keeps happening in the specific valley, you have to understand the geography that makes the Texas Hill Country one of the most flash flood-prone regions in the United States. The Hill Country sits at transition zone between the dry, elevated Edwards Plateau to the west and the humid air masses that flow in from the Gulf of Mexico to the south and east. When those air masses collide with the plateau, they are forced upward, releasing enormous amounts of rainfall in a compressed area. The rivers that drain the plateau, the Guadalupe, the Pedernales, the Llano, the Blanco, run through steep, narrow limestone canyons. Limestone doesn't absorb water, it sheds it. When rain falls on the plateau, it moves fast, funneled by the canyon walls into the river channels below, with almost no time between the rainfall and the surge. Hydrologists call this a flash flood alley. The official term is the Balcones Escarpment, the geological boundary where the plateau meets the lower terrain. Every single one of the most catastrophic floods in Texas history has occurred along this boundary, in these rivers in this valley. The 1921 flood on the Guadalupe killed more than 200 people. The 1987 flood on the Guadalupe near Comfort killed 10 people in a single campground. The 2025 flood killed more than 130. And now the river is rising again. The new warning sirens that were installed after last year's deaths activated overnight. Camp Mystic, where 27 children died, remains closed. But summer camps dot the banks of the Guadalupe up and down the valley. At least one camp, Camp La Gita, proactively evacuated its campers after seeing the forecast. Others kept their campers in place, monitoring conditions through the night. The memory of last year was not distant. It was a year old, and the river was doing the same thing it did then. Texas Governor Greg Abbott held a press conference and confirmed the deaths. More than 1,300 emergency responders have been deployed across the region: boats, helicopters, drones, game wardens, volunteer firefighters, the Cajun Navy. The governor noted that the new sirens worked. He noted that the state was better prepared than it was a year ago. He said they expected more total rainfall than last year, but that the water was not rising as rapidly. Hours later, the gauge at Comfort exceeded last year's record. The city of Kerrville is effectively cut off. The main bridge across the city is closed. City officials are urging residents to shelter in place at the highest level of their homes. The police chief told residents directly, "Stay home, avoid flooded roadways, do not attempt to drive through low water crossings." The mayor thanked the state for improving flood warning systems. Both of them were speaking in real time as rescues were still underway. Low water crossings are where Texas flash floods kill most of their victims. Not in collapsed buildings. Not from debris. From cars. Drivers who approach a road covered in moving water make a calculation about whether they can make it across and are wrong. 6 inches of fast-moving water can sweep a person off their feet. 2 feet of water can float a car. 3 feet can carry away a truck. The Guadalupe and Pedernales and their tributaries cross hundreds of roads throughout the hill country, and every one of those crossings becomes a potential death trap the moment the river comes up. This morning, every single one of them was either closed or should have been. And yet people still tried to cross. They always do. Emergency crews this morning pulled people from submerged vehicles across the region. A helicopter operated by Travis County Starflight, the emergency rescue service that covers the Austin area, was conducting one of those rescues when, according to reports, one person died. The details are still being confirmed, but the pattern is not new. Every major Texas flood produces the same statistic. The majority of deaths happen in vehicles at low water crossings in the dark from a decision that seemed survivable and wasn't. The Cajun Navy, a volunteer rescue organization that formed after Hurricane Katrina and has deployed to every major Texas flood since, launched boats into Kerr County before sunrise. In Bandera County, volunteers worked to move a herd of horses out of rising water and onto higher ground. In Uvalde, where 20 inches of rain had already fallen in 48 hours, roads were underwater and the city was described as practically impassable. No way in, no way out. More than 40 rescues were conducted in Uvalde County alone. This is what a flash flood emergency looks like from the inside, not the dramatic wall of water that appears in disaster films. The slow accumulation of closed roads, stranded vehicles, flooded homes, lost communication, and emergency crews stretched across a geography too large and too wet to cover completely. The people who die in flash floods usually do not die dramatically. They die quietly, in the dark, in a car on a road that was passable an hour ago, in a situation that escalated faster than any reasonable person expected. That is what rapid rise means in practice. The gauge near Kerrville rose 32 feet in 4 hours. A 32-foot rise in 4 hours is 8 feet per hour. That is the river climbing the height of a basketball hoop every 60 minutes, through the night, while people were asleep. People are being pulled out of the water as this is being written. The river is still rising in some locations. More rain is forecast to move through the area. Here is what comes next, and here is what nobody wants to say plainly. The Texas Hill Country will flood again. Not might flood, will flood. The geology hasn't changed. The Gulf moisture hasn't changed. The limestone canyons that funnel water faster than any storm drainage system can handle haven't changed. What changes year by year is how much rainfall falls in how short a window, and every measure of that variable is trending in the same direction. Warmer Gulf waters hold more moisture. Warmer air holds more water vapor before releasing it. When the release comes, it comes harder and faster than the same storm system would have produced a decade ago. The connection between warm Gulf water and extreme rainfall in the hill country is not theoretical. Meteorologists who study this region have documented it directly. When the Gulf of Mexico runs warm, right now the Gulf is running near record temperatures. The air masses that move inland from the Gulf carry more moisture than they would have in a cooler Gulf environment. That moisture doesn't distribute itself evenly across Texas. Concentrates, stalls. It collides with the limestone plateau and releases itself all at once, in a window of hours, into watersheds that were never designed to absorb it. Uvalde received 20 inches of rain in 48 hours. The city's annual average rainfall is about 23 inches. The same storm that is flooding the Guadalupe River Basin dropped nearly an entire year's worth of rain on parts of southwest Texas in 2 days. That is not a normal rainstorm amplified by geography. That is a category of rainfall event that did not occur with this frequency a generation ago, occurring for the second year in a row over the exact same valley. The Texas Division of Emergency Management has more resources deployed today than it did a year ago. The warning sirens that were installed after the Camp Mystic deaths activated this morning. The governor held a press conference within hours of the first reports. By the measures of institutional preparedness, the state did better this year than last. It is still not enough. It was never going to be enough, as long as the conditions that produce these floods continue to intensify and the infrastructure of the hill country remains unchanged. The roads through the limestone canyons still cross the rivers at low points. The rivers still drain the plateau through the same narrow channels they have always used. The summer camps still sit on the banks of the Guadalupe, because that is where the river is beautiful and where the camp has always been. The National Weather Service has studied the Guadalupe River Basin for decades. Their own models show that the frequency of extreme rainfall events in this region is increasing. Not because anything unusual is happening to the Texas Hill Country specifically, because the atmosphere above it is warmer and wetter than it used to be, and warm, wet air, when it stalls over limestone country and releases everything at once, has only one place to go: into the river, down the canyon, through the valley. Last year, 27 children died at Camp Mystic. This year, Camp Mystic is closed. The money raised in their memory has gone to install more sirens, and the other camps along the river are watching the gauges and making calls through the night, deciding whether to evacuate or shelter in place in the same valley on the same river in the same week of July. The sirens that were installed after the deaths at Camp Mystic activated for the first time this morning. Some of them worked. Some residents got out. Some didn't. The rescues are still ongoing. 1 year between the flood that killed 130 people and the flood that is killing people right now.